Hello everyone, this is Max Bemis of Say Anything, formerly of Say Anything, Perma, Two Tongues, and now my solo project, and I also write comics, and I'm a dad. So, um, I've written a couple of sort of lengthy diatribes over the past, 2 to 5 years, trying to explain what I've been going through as a person. Before I convey that this is like some kind of weird bummer video, or maybe I'm admitting to killing someone or something, this is actually kind of a celebration. I just finished Last Wave's Song Shop last night, which took a long time, and we're finally finishing, I would say 98% of the Kickstarter fulfillment stuff. That has turned into an epic project in a good and extremely taxing way, and I'll explain that a little bit on this video. So we're celebrating because we're done with that, and tomorrow or the next day we're going to be announcing kind of the next phase of what we're doing. Obviously, people have asked us since Say Anything is whatever on hiatus, and we can't even tour with me solo or with Perma, like, what are we doing now? And everyone knows I'm kind of writing comics, but even that industry is kind of a little bit on hold right now. So we've been doing a lot, mostly personally, but we've been leading up to doing something really exciting. So I definitely just wanted to check in and kind of explain face to face some of the challenges and fun things we faced over the past few years. And so it's kind of a long story, but I'm even though I'm like a really long-winded Jew, I'm gonna do my best not to kvetch for too long, and I'm going to try to condense it. So I guess I'm gonna start out sort of summing up my thoughts on Say Anything, and then talk a little bit about what's been happening in the past 5 years, and specifically the last like 3 years, as to why Say Anything stopped touring and everything. And then I'm going to talk about what we're doing next, and some specific really funny and weird stories throughout. So yeah, if you can stick with it till the end of the video, there will be at least some nuggets, a few nuggets for sure. I'm making Sherry edit this because I've never edited a video. You'll notice I'm very bad at Instagram. I'm gonna try to be better at that. That's like a revelation I'm gonna give you right now. I'm bad. My hands shake and I sweat a lot. So like the only reason this is actually being edited is so I can like wipe the copious sweat off my face. If you've seen us live, you understand that. So again, I wanted to start out with kind of my thoughts on Say Anything. I feel like the band and my character has been, and this is what every artist says, let's be honest, confused. But I think that the reason every artist and band member says they've been confused and their art has been confused, A, it's not always true. There's a lot of people who get it, but B, it's the nature of art that you are projecting emotions, and the art itself isn't the artist. So, I think the parts that people identify with Say Anything, which is like empathy and self-loathing, but in a way that kind of lifts you up as well as tears yourself down, are definitely true. Much of the really, even the anger, a lot of the anger is true. It mostly, the reason Say Anything even started, to be honest, was because I had a crush on a girl in high school, and it kind of took its roots in seeing her being like literally abused emotionally by like various guys who would just hook up with her, blah, blah, blah. And that sounds so emo. Like I basically took this girl and made her into my like muse, and she was like my Madonna horror, but no, she was my best friend. I really loved this person. She was kind of the only person I could talk to or relate to in high school, because there were a lot of jerks, at least for like the first half of high school. And I didn't like her being hurt. I think that was kind of my entry into feminism, was seeing this girl who I thought was so brilliant and had so much to offer, just like going to parties, getting wasted and getting taken advantage of, and then calling me and being like, crying, blah, blah, blah. And so our baseball album is definitely all about that. And then I went to college to escape this kind of heartbreak that I had been through. And I think some people know I went to college on the East Coast at a place called Sarah Lawrence, which is this liberal arts university that we kind of sang and wrote about in Say Anything. But I think there's this conception that I kind of became like Hunter S. Thompson when I went to college and like started like doing blow all the time and just having endless promiscuous sex. In reality, I think, yeah, I had sex with I lost my virginity. Sorry, kids who are probably watching this in 10 years. I lost my virginity to like a sophomore or a junior or something when I was a freshman in college, and she was awesome and really cool, and we dated, and I didn't sleep with anyone else in college. And I didn't sleep with anyone else all the way through, I believe, the Is a Real Boy process up until maybe when we were making the record or writing it. But I did like kind of make out with people. I mean, strictly make out. I really didn't even just like, I'm talking making out, like old school making out, because I really had a hard time, and I still cannot really be intimate. I'm on that sort of sliding sexuality spectrum where it's hard for me to literally become aroused unless I care about someone. You know, it's happened quite a few times, but it's rare for me, and I have to be in like another place. It's not my natural state. So I was writing during that time because the natural thing for me, honestly, I probably would have fit pretty well into a society where you like waited for marriage. Not that that's what everyone has to do. Like, sex is beautiful, do what you want, but like, I've always been a diehard romantic. And so I always felt kind of weird. The only person I ever felt comfortable enough to do that with was this one girl. And then wrote Is a Real Boy about, you know, it didn't work out with her, so I was just empty, and I had those impulses, and girls were sort of liking me. I was like the, you know, California guy at an East Coast liberal arts school where like most of the guys were totally gay, and so like I did well, but didn't sleep with girls except for one girl. But it made me feel dirty regardless, and it made me feel like a misogynist and a womanizer, and that's where a lot of those songs about being a womanizer, whether it be Whoa or Molly Conley, those were all written about that feeling. Like, you can even be a guy who picks up a Playboy and it makes you feel like the dude in Whoa. You know what I mean? And so basically, I don't want to call it a character because it's so pretentious, even though in the end it did turn into Oliver Appropriate, who's an actual character. But the songs were written from this viewpoint of, and I think this is something that people sometimes fail to see. It's like people throughout time in blues songs, not just like white boy emo and indie rock, classical music. I mean, the mentality of wanting to kill someone or wanting to throw them away or hurt them because they hurt you is not gender inclusive. It's not sexuality inclusive. It's not emo inclusive. And it's not even real. Like, no one really wants to, unless you're an actual psychopath, and there are those people, kill the person who broke your heart. I mean, that's just psychopathy. You should be in jail. But I didn't. And I doubt I even said anything that extreme, but all the anger and the pathos, even towards people that didn't understand me, it was just an expression of an emotion that was like about 1/10 of what I ever felt less of that I ever felt. I was mostly a happy person, very wide-eyed and kind of tripped out and hippie-ish, and just loved life, had close friends, and got emotional at times. And emo doesn't mean emotional. I think we've already covered this about 1,000 times in pop culture, that like, I think it's basically an appropriation of a misogynistic culture to designate you know, a punk movement that was started by like Fugazi and Rites of Spring to be a reaction to misogyny and say it's misogynistic. Of course, there were so many misogynists disturbing the shit out of me. I mean, I walked into touring for the first time and I was disturbed. It was like watching Requiem for a Dream. I had sex with 2 people and I never cheated on anyone, and it was horrifying. It was horrifying to see so many of the people that I grew up thinking were these chaste, Some people were in love with their girlfriends, and like it's just so sad to be away from them. But like in reality, a lot of people were cheating on their girlfriends and doing tons of blow and hooking up with underage girls. Like it was a thing for sure. It's not, it's, I have to wipe the sweat off myself. We're gonna have to cut. But no, that's where In Defense of the Genre came from, was that I felt that it was essentially that the backlash against emo was generally a misogynist thing, instead of the fact that emo was perceived as misogynist. I felt like that was generally being rooted in hipster culture, hence Admit It and all that stuff. Hipster culture was generally at that time very misogynistic. You would go to hipster parties and girls would be like taking out their boobs and dudes would be like doing blow off their boobs. Like it was like almost hip to like act like a 13-year-old boy. Most of the hipsters I knew were so bad and they wouldn't even hide it. And again, I was somewhere in the middle. I don't know where I fit in culturally, but when I say hipster, I mean like dudes a little bit older than me who like lived in Brooklyn or Silver Lake. That's what I mean. So I really felt like it was an unfair assessment of my music and everyone else's music. I made that record to generally say that's not why I'm in this. I'm in this for the actual reason that I think that women have been mistreated, love should be promoted, and I'm also really upset and I kind of hate myself and I have mental health problems. And that's, you know, that's In Defense. So that was leaning a little bit more towards sincerity, I guess you could say. And then the next few albums, practically all the way to Oliver Appropriate, you could just put them in one giant bunch, which is that they're basically, except for obvious allusions to poetic language, like whatever, like I emerge from the vagina of truth, wet and sopping with the blood of my father. Like clearly that didn't happen to me. I only came out of one vagina, but yeah, it was all just about falling in love with my beautiful wife, Sherry, who I am, you know, totally hopelessly in love with to this day, and having beautiful children and the neuroses that filled me with. I would like to think that those records are not necessarily easily crunched into the emo paradigm in terms of what they're singing about. They're a lot about kind of like a, you know, an old Jewish ex-emo guy slowly starting to realize he's an adult and whatnot. But those records, that's what carved out our sort of like place, our actual place in sort of the history of music, I think, were those records. Because, you know, Is a Real Boy was one record, and the people that continued to come see us were not the like thousands of random people who liked Wow, I Can Get Sexual, really. I mean, no one, I was about to say something really mean, but like not that many people go to see Lifehouse anymore. They play casinos. And yet we had this kind of like punk cult following, and that was because of the entirety of our, you know, of those records. And I think people knew that I was sincere. It made sense. Contrasted to like this adolescent trying to figure himself out and saying stuff that was kind of bullshit on the first couple records. Finally, Oliver Appropriate. By the time I wrote Oliver Appropriate, my wife was pregnant with my boy, Charlie, so that's our third child. And I was starting to get very burnt out with touring. I love it. I love playing shows. I mean, it's transcendent. It's better than any drug. I feel at one with the audience. I'm in no way faking it when I'm up there. It's really hard for me to dial it in. In fact, I can't. And so my approach to not dialing it in is to literally disappear backstage. I barely would even hang out with my friends in my band and just sit in the back lounge. I never or barely ever partied or hung out, and people would even notice, where's Max? What's Max doing? I would either sit with my family in the back of this bus, crowded into one room, trying to just replicate our home environment, or I would be sleeping all day, wake up, drink a lot, and then go on stage and release all my emotions and endorphins. And so that was real up there. And even though it seems like I'm sort of an extrovert, I guess technically I am, if you understand the word. Like I act strange to try to communicate my emotions, but in reality, I like being secluded. I like being with my family. I'm very open with the people I love, but And that's why I love playing, because I love my audience. But beyond that, I don't like the social aspect of being in a band. And to be honest, like being an actor or like having a desk job, it's so much so about the culture. Having a job is about the culture and, you know, the day to day. And I'm bad at that stuff. You know, I'm really bad at, especially when there's so much amorality and facetiousness, and, you know, the music industry itself can be pretty like predatory. And that was around the same time like so many people were getting exposed for being just straight up predators, and I would just read about it. Again, like as I said, you know, to directly address my sexual history as it pertains to say anything, I've had sex with like 8 to 10 people, a couple of which were one night stands. Probably both of those people I remained friends with after. Others were girls I just dated and then it didn't really work out. So I was never like a, you know, man about town, so to speak. So that was something that I personally, though I won't condemn it, there are some people where sexual liberation is a really positive expression for them. But for me, it was not what was comfortable for me. So I was putting and being that I was like a father at this point of 2 little girls, it was really not working out. So my wife is pregnant, and I started to just kind of implode from the image that I guess put out is so different. People always tell me this is so different than what it's like to talk to me or hang out with me. I mean, I'm sure you can tell right now. So seeing people comment on me being, you know, full of myself or facetious, or I'm like some kind of like criminal with the song shop trying to rob people, like I'm definitely a very fucked up, flawed human being. I mean, can be irresponsible, I can be a procrastinator, I can be an anger demon. I mean, there are things I can do that are, I'm bipolar, so I'm literally insane, but there are things that I'm not, and I'm just very empathetic. I would like to think I'm kind, and to see those things, it's the lack of being able to discern the art from the person. So in anger, I started to read about what that kind of person would really be like. If I was that careless, if I was this prototypical emo guy, what is that person like? And I took little pieces from all the sort of shitty people that I knew in the industry, and then pieces of myself, but more so the pieces of what was perceived of me. And those things combined, and I created this character, Oliver, and wrote a record about him. And one of the big things, obviously, about Oliver is he's queer and repressed. And to be honest, you could say I was repressed and queer. I mean, I was willing to admit it to anyone who I got kind of deep with, but I never felt the need to go out and talk about it. It was almost laughable to me. I mean, I have some semi-controversial beliefs that like a lot of more people than they realize or we realize are somewhere on the spectrum and just kind of are not in touch with it. I've always been in touch with it. I never felt like it was a big deal. And I know that's like a privileged position. But so I thought, this is a guy who's never been okay with it. And yet he uses it as some kind of like, it's the weirdest thing in like bohemian life where you see guys who are repressed and queer, but because they really don't like the women they're with, and they will hook up with guys as almost a gimmick to appear to be worldly and compassionate and maybe feminist or like queer friendly, but in reality they're treating women like shit, and any guy they might be involved with is just basically being used. And part of that was inspired by my friend Carl and this amazing and witty record he wrote about loving a straight guy, who, by the way, the real guy was not Oliver. He was like a nice guy, but I was like, just think of this jerk who would like seduce this nice gay boy because he can't be, you know, can't be open about his sexuality. And I had not publicly admitted to being queer. So I was like, okay, well, this is the flip side of the actual truth. And we put out the record. Past 3 to 5 years, this is the turning point that, I mean, is kind of the main reason I'm making this video before I proceed with my career. so that I can properly explain this. Um, Basically, again, my wife is pregnant. I'm making Oliver appropriate. And Song Shop. Now, Song Shop has been this thing where it saved us financially from the crash of the record industry. Basically, we went from being on a major label, where they would give us huge advances, and we were little kids who didn't know how to deal with money. I mean, that does happen. And we were lucky, of course, but we didn't know what we were doing. And then we ended up having a family. And by the time most people start a family, they start to learn how to be adults. And we were basically like child actors who had not been prepared for that. So we're like, oh God, we're not given random money just for being ourselves. What do we do? And so I had to sit there and brainstorm, and I thought of the Song Shop project, which is custom songs for fans. And I've been doing it for 10 years. And it's something I want to actually start exposing to you guys, the method behind it, because it's really, I think, interesting. It's a muscle, but it does require me to sit by myself away from my family for hours and hours and hours. I usually do them like a lot in a row. I know people probably won't believe this, but I've done as much as like 100 songs in, maybe 26 hours, and I've still had them be what I consider to be cool songs, because some of my best songs are written in 5 minutes, like Alive with the Glory of Love, that just comes out. So I applied that to songwriting for other people, and I was like, how can I do it? What if I just put my entire soul and my heart into a song? I could probably do it just as quickly if I didn't sit and labor over it. That said, you still have to sit there in front of the computer, and you can't do anything else but be emotionally connected to the story of the person you're writing about. So, so I had been doing Song Shop, and times just getting harder and harder. We were doing okay. People had this perception that I was like, Rivers Cuomo and living in a mansion, but in reality, I live in a small town, and we were middle class, okay. And so around that time, now having had 2 kids, things were getting stretched out even more, and knowing I had a 3rd one coming up, I was pushing myself to the literal limit. And we were going on tour all the time. We were doing those shows where we were playing Olive Is a Real Boy and In Defense and Self-Titled. So I was, as someone who's already, like I was saying, socially awkward, needs to be around his family, bipolar. I mean, we don't need to get too into what that is, but I'm fucking nuts. And I need a lot of attention and medication and sleep. And it's not necessarily the healthiest way to live for someone who's not 19. So I'm at this point in my late 20s or early 30s. And I remember, in this very last wave of Song Shop, not this one, but the one I think 2 waves before, I was having the hardest time, and I was literally losing my mind trying to get through this. I had to sit in the studio away from my family. I can hear babies crying. Sherry's having to take care of all of it, and I'm in there all day writing songs. And so I started to just basically use drugs to try to get through it. And I've been pretty great about using drugs. There were a few various drugs involved, but the one that really screwed me was pot. And I know that sounds really stupid because we're living in an enlightened age where people know pot is not the devil. It's great for people who can smoke it or take it or whatever. I think it's a beautiful plant. But for me, and I do strongly believe for a lot of people who are bipolar or have emotional problems, it can make you paranoid. If you're extra bipolar, it can take you into places where you lose track of reality. And that's honestly what all those incidents that had been written about me during the Is a Real Boy times were all induced by smoking. That it was never just not taking my meds. So I was even taking my meds during this last Song Shop period, but I was smoking. I had started smoking pot. And it went okay for a while. It was great. I was like, yes, I can do this. Oh my God, I missed you for 10 years. Where have you been? I was so happy, and I went to Australia and I smoked there and we played shows and I was like, this is great. I'm playing shows and I'm stoned. Good stuff, right? But then I get back to finish the Song Shops and I'm just getting pushed and pushed. I'm getting less and less sleep. And I finished that wave of Song Shops at like after staying up for like 48 hours in a row high. And that was the day my son was born. And I wrote about this when I stumbled out just like into the light after being in the studio, and like the sun hit me and it's like, come inside, and we have home births. So I literally walked from in my studio into the house and then watched my son get born, just kind of coming down, and it was beautiful. I looked him in the eye and I had this feeling like, you need to now start getting better. But I didn't. I just knew it was going to lead to me getting better. And I'm going to stop again for a second because this is the weird part. And I'm going to preface it by saying the Kanye part. Kanye didn't do anything bad to me, but this is pretty much the explanation for the breakup, for saying anything, and why I really lost my mind and have disappeared for a long time. So be excited for that. Hopefully I'm still on frame. Sherry set this up for me entirely. So here we go. Okay, so Kanye West. Yay. Yeezy, as some call him. There's probably a few other names that I'm forgetting. It's this literal weird mad fact that Kanye was involved in the sort of songwriting inspiration for our album I Don't Think It Is, and that's true. But people don't exactly know what happened between me and him and how that actually links to my life, besides the fact that I had like a really cool interaction with someone who's super famous and is also now losing his mind publicly. Love him though, by the way. But basically the main reason I ended up working with Kanye was not for music, but for a narrative thing that Kanye was working on that obviously I can't talk about with probably getting sniped. But it was because he had heard that not only was I, bipolar and a musician, but that I wrote comics, and people told him about my comics. And so we started working together on a narrative project. And I would sit in meetings with him. I met him at, his crazy mansion in Calabasas, and he flew me out, and then had several meetings in different places in California with him. Just basically kind of was weirdly brought into his circle for a few weeks, and flew back home, flew back out. And I did get to work on some music in the studio with my brother-in-law, Darren. We worked on a song for him that never got released, but I would like to think was pretty good. And that's the kind of dorkish, I met Kanye element of it. And that's great. That came and went. There were some opportunities for me to keep working with him, but I couldn't be in LA. And he has a million things going on. So who knows if he even remembers who I am 5 years later. But this is the important thing that came of it. During that time where I told you I had started smoking again and was losing my mind, and my baby boy had just been born, there was this dude. And again, I'm not going to name him. This isn't exactly a Me Too level scenario, so I don't believe that it's necessary to name this guy. But suffice to say, there's a guy who I met through Kanye who drove me insane. No one's ever driven me insane before. I've already done a pretty good job of doing that myself. So he had worked for Kanye in a very close capacity. If you read articles about Kanye West, he generally has this weird brain trust that he surrounds himself with, of really smart, cool people, musicians and producers and marketing people that are just in a constant circle, and he's brainstorming fashion stuff and he's brainstorming film stuff, whatever, it's constant. And even his songwriting process can be with like 10 people and Paul McCartney hang out in a room, you know what I mean? It's like, so this was one of those people, and he was there at every meeting with me and Kanye, kind of at that time, kind of his right-hand man, just the only other person in the car with me and Kanye when we would be by ourselves. And he was really cool and sweet, just kind of an awkward, Jewish, clumsy, sweaty guy. And hello, I'm not one to judge that. Once I stopped kind of talking to or working with Kanye and went back to doing my own thing and made I Don't Think It Is, I stopped talking to this guy. Around the time that I was losing it, I reached out to this dude. And it was sort of like I was going through my role. Have you ever just sat there with your iPhone and you're like, what am I doing with my life? I should stay in touch with these people who are kind of cool and have paid attention to me and are nice. Like, what am I doing? So I emailed this guy and I'm like, what's up, man? Like, you know, we shared a plane together by ourselves. He's, you know, was nice to me. I was like, how are you? You know, I had this concept of him as kind of lonely. And I was like, dude, you know, I hope you're doing okay, blah, blah, blah. And this guy's about my age, if you can picture him. I'm not going to get too much more specific, but, you know, just think random Jewish guy. And he called me back, and he sounded weird right off the bat. Like, I can't really describe it, but just like he was going on his own trip. And I had just probably a week before that come out as queer on Twitter, and one of the first things he said to me was like, how are you? How are you? I'm like, I'm good, man. How are you? And he goes, are you a faggot, Max? And I'm like, hello. You know, immediately I'm like, what do I say to this? I knew this guy was like a hipster and sort of like a, you know, a leftist, prototypical, you know, whatever, millennial. So I knew he wasn't literally performing a hate crime on me over the phone, and he knew me, and he knew that he knew people who knew me. So he's not just like straight up gay bashing me over the phone. So I'm like, yeah, I guess I am, man. You know, whatever. Yeah. And he laughed. And so I was like, okay, so he meant that ironically. It was some kind of weird joke. And that's basically where the craziest few weeks of my life occurred. To this day, I have PTSD. I mean, that's honestly the main reason I've been off the internet mostly. It's been the main reason why I haven't been touring. It's been a reason I've been in therapy for a long time. I've written entire bodies of work inspired by these few weeks I spent talking to this guy, maybe a couple months. And the best way I can explain it, and it's super hard to explain, I actually started talking about it in like an interview with Alternative Press, and I saw someone comment like, this is some Brian Wilson shit, man. Like, what is he talking about? I'm like, no, this happened to me. This happens to people. Because there are people who work for famous people whose job it is, and I'm not kidding. You know, Kanye's a great example. I imagine like Shia LaBeouf would probably be a good example. And the job is to push this, they're like an assistant who pushes this famous weird person into weirder, more famous climbs by like provoking their intellect, having weird discussions with them, introducing them to people like Bret Easton Ellis. And, you know, in this case, this guy had worked with Elon Musk and Kanye. And in fact, at the time I was talking to him, and I'm pretty sure unless he was straight up lying, which I don't think he was still working for Elon Musk for a period. And he was sweet in many ways. I think he wanted to help me in a sick way, but we would have these esoteric conversations for hours at a time, mostly with him calling me over and over and over again. There were conversations about art, about my purpose, about, you know, a lot about Kanye. He was very bitter about Kanye because he no longer worked with him. I think he had been fired, and based on what I had seen later, definitely had just a breakup with Kanye. And I was like his rebound. So this guy went into the mind of like a bipolar guy who was having a manic episode because of pot, me, and literally kind of made me into a project. And you know, if you take the cliche of like Max Bemis and you take someone who's like twice as crazy and like not just, you know, mentally ill, but like socially, something's going on there. Something's going on there. He even admitted he was like doing tons of blow, blah, blah, blah. And he just entered himself into my life. You know, Sherry hated it. Sherry didn't know what was going on, but he would talk about these conspiracies. He would talk about, and I come from LA, like where, you know, I know enough sort of, you know, famous people to the point where those things don't really impress me or convince me. But he was convincing because he had been working for like the most powerful person in pop music and pop culture, and I had actually seen some of it. I had been there with him and Kanye, so I knew that he wasn't making up all of it, but some of it was the ramblings of a madman on cocaine. And since I was a madman smoking pot, I just usually sat there quietly and listened to him ramble. And one of his main stances was that saying anything did not matter. He refused to even listen to say anything. He's like, I like the songs you wrote for Kanye. You know, you're a talented writer. At that point, I had already, you know, established myself as a comic writer. He loved that I was working for Marvel, which I was writing for Marvel Comics at that time. And he's like, you need to focus on this. Forget emo. Emo is bullshit. Say anything this band you're in is bullshit. I will never listen to you. You need to get off the road. You're going to lose your mind. Because he saw that I was actually losing my mind. He's like, and just focus on being a writer. And at that time, since I was already, you know, people around me were noticing I was becoming manic again. And it was affecting my relationship with my wife and my family. Him talking about that and minimizing say anything, plus the growing discomfort with being scrutinized. I mean, I can't I can't stress that enough, that I've always been someone who's really sensitive. And over the years, since I've been like this polarizing person in the scene, where it's like, oh, I loved as a real boy, but now he's like a piece of shit. He was a piece of shit then. He was a misogynist, whatever. Just like these prototypical sort of visions of who I am that are not based on knowing me as a person. Those things have always really hit home for me. So I was like, yeah, fuck this, man. I want to go write movies and, you know, whatever you want me to do. Guide me, my friend. It was The Master. Have you seen that movie? It was literally The Master, which is basically about Scientology and a weird, crazy guy being brainwashed by a charismatic madman. So that's what happened. It happened to me for 2 months. And in the middle, he was still there. I broke up saying anything. And I don't regret it. I hate to say that. It saved my life. Because as I said, I was already losing it. This guy is not responsible for me destroying my life. That's all me. But I can confidently say that I don't believe I would have done it if it wasn't for that. It was just a catalyst to me putting it all aside. And, you know, eventually he got so weird and aggressive and mean that I can't even, nor do I want to get into the various stories of how he would like verbally abuse me and be rude about my family, things that he actually denies. That's okay, whatever. But I still have PTSD to this day. I'll zone out and just start thinking about stuff he said or things he told me Kanye did, and just like whoa, just like it's a lot to take. So especially when some of it is real stories about people and the world that's going on beneath and above you. So I broke up saying anything, and I stopped talking to this guy. You know, thank God. And then I spent a year getting better. I mean, for 6 months-ish, I barely left my bed. I stopped talking to all my friends. Like about the time that I wrote that letter, you know, describing why I left Say Anything, I was a mess. You know, everyone, I mean, and you guys, I believe, of anyone, understand how in love me and Sherry are. That was when because of me, I pushed us to our limit. You know, and we had a crying baby boy, not just a girl, by the way, a boy who isn't as obsessed with daddy as to forgive me being a complete piece of shit at that time. So he was like, ah! You know, and I'm just losing it. So, you know, during that entire period, you know, I had to readjust my medications. I poured myself into writing, but this is another important point. Marvel Comics isn't like Sony, who's used to dealing with all these kind of Steven Tyler-esque, you know, crazy peep, Julian Casablancas or whatever type crazy men. And so that the fact that I lost it affected my job and status at Marvel, and they were pretty much done with me after that. You know, indie companies, they stuck with me. I'm starting to work with DC now, and they're, I think, a little bit more familiar with that personality type. Gerard? I'm just kidding. I love Gerard. But they, you know what I mean? Like, they worked with Grant Morrison and Neil Gaiman and all these complete weirdos. So, but Marvel didn't know what to do with me after that. And so I really had to kind of start again in music, in comics, and even in my personal life. And then Sherry got pregnant again, and we weren't planning on it. So to back it up a little bit, we started our Kickstarter in there because I had gotten off tour. We needed a way to live. You know, people, this is the hardest part to talk about, honestly, for me, is that you will get these Reddit threads, or even people who will go up to me on Twitter and be like, "You thief! Like, how can you take money from people for writing songs for them? And you don't even get them to them on time," or like, "Your Kickstarter was totally late." I'm like, what else do you want from me? For God's sake. I just turned into Jack Nicholson from The Shining. You know, but really, we have done nothing but work our absolute hardest, having 4 kids, and trying to do this Kickstarter, plus another wave of Song Shop, plus an acoustic tour, plus recording the actual music, plus raising our other kids, plus me doing comics. It's really been insane. And we have honestly done our best to provide the best products. I'm so proud of the comics I've made and the comics that are coming out. We can talk about some other time during a non-traumatic conversation. But, you know, I guess I do kind of want to address the haters to some degree. I feel like I'm in broken side just by doing that, but it's like, we've never had a bad intention towards our fans. We have never felt any inclination to exploit our fans, ever. You know, the whole idea of Song Shop was like, in the first place, was, man, someone could probably charge like $1,000 for this, but I'm going to charge $75 to $150 for it because I can do it quickly. I can connect to these people so easily because I love them, and it's going to get to stay with them for as long as possible. So throughout that process, which was kind of first of its kind, there were tons of learning experiences and people who got their songs super late and blah, 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 whatever. That sucks, but I couldn't have done it any other way. You know, same with the Kickstarter. I'm so proud of the perma record. We got so close with our fans through all of it. The fact that we even made our goal and surpassed it, and that people still stick with us, is so amazing. And I'm so fucking stoked on my EP that I've been recording because of everyone's help. Still, there will always be, I think we're just a polarizing family in that people don't like that we found a way to exist during a time where you're just, as a musician, expected to kind of starve. And if you're not doing what everyone else is doing, then you're a thief, honestly. So we can't care about that. I have 4 kids, and I care so much about our output. I mean, we've spent, since Charlie's birth, so that's coming up on 3 years, hiring babysitters every day and blah, blah, blah on a micro budget so that we could spend all day fulfilling these Kickstarters, and they're late as fuck. I mean, I of course they are, but we could have done it any other way, and our lives were saved by the Kickstarter, and so I can't have any regrets, unfortunately. But I will say we're learning, and in this sort of age where everyone is having to redefine how we do business in every way, you know, musicians are, and artists and writers are at the forefront of having to really redefine how we can live off our art. I am, you know, I annoy people with my politics sometimes. I mean, I just want everyone to be okay. Can that be clear? I think everyone deserves to live and eat and be free and believe what they want and love who they want and express themselves the way they want. And I'm not smart enough to know how to do that. The point is this. Right now, we are in our last couple of days of Kickstarter fulfillment. And there's still like a couple of outstanding things that are honestly going to take us another fucking like few months to a year to finish. Little things, you know, stuff we've already been in touch with people about, and we're going to give little pieces at a time. And the actual music, Perma's already out there. We love that record. The EP is getting mixed, and then it's going to be released, and then we're going to do Sherry's EP and the kids' EP. But before we get to this point, we are again tomorrow, I believe, going to announce kind of a remedial site where we're going to offer services kind of like Song Shop, not Song Shop anymore because I can't, but like, you know, similar to Song Shop, and do live performances, because we really do miss that. Stream live shows. Some of them are going to be full albums all at once. Some of them are going to be like, you know, handpicked set lists, Perma and me solo, and just various different types of shows. I'm going to be doing kind of a lecture series on writing and creativity. And there's going to be, you know, some of the other stuff that was available on the Kickstarter, like guest vocals, and some stuff that's just for charity. So that's going to be going up in the next few days. Is just keep your eyes open. And again, this was the most convoluted, winding fucking thing of all time. But I will say it's definitely a lot more exemplary of who I am than like a really manicured 6-page essay that's trying, you know, with literary allusions. You know, I mean, this is the most I can explain it. You know, I've been brainwashed. I've gone manic for the first time in 10 years. I've been on and off drugs. I've had unplanned pregnancies, planned pregnancies. It's been a doozy. So that is to say, I want to now re-enter the stratosphere of interacting with you guys and not be so scared about it, like feeling that everything's out of context because some of this stuff has not been expressed or properly shared. And so if you made it to the end of this video, I feel like you've been able to like somewhat look me in the fake digital eye and see that, you know, it's not just a clever construct. This is what my life has been. It's been the hardest 5 years of my life, and I'm really excited to start to attack things from a creative perspective again. And the final thing I will say is, because I did make the decision to break up Say Anything under duress, yes, we're still broken up. Yes, I still have no direct plans to ever do anything with Say Anything, but I definitely don't back my own statement that like, this is it forever. You know what I mean? Which is predictable, of course. Like, my Chem, come on, bros, we knew, and we're happy about it. But it's like, we're just one of those bands. I think that's what I wanted to put out there. It's like, there's no definitive thing. If I hadn't been brainwashed, I probably would have just said like, I need like 10 years off or whatever it is. It's just me making music with my friends, honestly. And whether I come back to it in 20 years or 10 years, and whether we make music or just play some of the old Say Anything songs, it's still alive. It's still alive. I still appreciate Say Anything. I'm not sick of it and upset with it. I miss it. And I'm just glad that you guys have followed me to kind of my new pursuits, and that you're even here watching this video right now. I mean, I cannot thank you enough. That's all. And I love you. Thank you. So pay attention to Instagram. We're going to announce what this site exactly is, and I hope to communicate with you a lot more from now on. Love you.